The dust kicked up around Teresa Ainsworth's worn boots as she stumbled into Goldfield, Nevada, with nothing but the tattered dress on her back and a desperate prayer on her lips. It was the summer of 1878, and the sun beat down mercilessly on the mining town that sprawled across the desert landscape like a collection of forgotten dreams. Teresa had walked for 3 days straight after the stagecoach she'd been traveling on broken axle 50 miles back. The driver had promised to return with help, but she'd known better than to wait. Women alone in the desert didn't last long, especially when the water ran out. So she'd started walking, following the rough trail that led toward civilization, toward anything that might offer her a chance at survival. Her throat burned with thirst, and her vision swam as she made her way down the main street. Prospectors and cowboys moved past her, some casting curious glances her way, others too absorbed in their own concerns to notice another desperate soul in a town full of them. Goldfield was booming with the recent silver discoveries, but that prosperity seemed to exist in a world separate from the one Teresa inhabited. She'd come west with such hope just 6 months ago, believing the advertisement that promised respectable work for young women in Nevada's growing towns. Instead, she'd found herself trapped in a situation that had nearly broken her spirit. It had taken every ounce of courage she possessed to flee, and now here she stood, penniless and alone, wondering if freedom was worth dying for. Teresa's legs finally gave out, and she found herself leaning against a post outside what appeared to be a general store. Her hands trembled as she tried to steady herself. She needed water. She needed food. She needed help. But she had nothing to offer in return. No coin, no prospects, nothing but pride that was quickly crumbling under the weight of desperation. "Miss, you all right there?" The voice came from somewhere to her left, masculine and tinged with genuine concern. Teresa turned her head slowly, afraid that any quick movement might send her toppling to the ground. Through the haze of exhaustion, she saw a cowboy watching her. He was tall, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of creek water after rain, a soft green-brown that seemed out of place in this harsh desert landscape. His hat was pushed back on his head, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the ends, and his clothes, though dusty from travel, were well maintained. "I'll manage," Teresa said, though her voice came out as barely more than a whisper. The cowboy stepped closer, his brow furrowing with concern. "You don't look like you'll manage much of anything without some water and food in you. When's the last time you ate?" Teresa wanted to tell him it was none of his concern, wanted to maintain some shred of dignity, but her body betrayed her. Her knees buckled, and suddenly the cowboy's strong hands were supporting her, keeping her from collapsing entirely. The touch was gentle despite his obvious strength, and something in his steady presence made her want to weep. "Easy now," he said softly. "I've got you. Let's get you inside where it's cooler." He helped her into the general store, and the shade was such a relief that Teresa nearly sobbed. The shopkeeper, a portly man with suspicious eyes, started to say something, but the cowboy cut him off with a look that brooked no argument. "She needs water and some bread if you've got it," the cowboy said, guiding Teresa to a chair near the counter. The shopkeeper's eyes narrowed. "You paying for her, Isaac Vance?" So that was his name. Isaac Vance. Teresa filed it away as Isaac reached into his pocket and pulled out a single silver dollar. Even in her weakened state, she noticed the way his jaw tightened, the way his fingers lingered on the coin before placing it on the counter. That dollar looked like it might be all he had. The shopkeeper took the coin and returned with a canteen and half a loaf of bread. Isaac uncorked the canteen and handed it to Teresa, who drank deeply, grateful, tears streaming down her dusty cheeks. "Slow now," Isaac cautioned. "Don't make yourself sick." Teresa forced herself to take smaller sips, then accepted the bread he broke off for her. The food hit her empty stomach like a blessing, and she had to fight the urge to devour it all at once. Isaac watched her carefully, his expression a mixture of concern and something else she couldn't quite identify. "Thank you," she managed once she'd taken the edge off her hunger and thirst. "I don't know how I'll repay you." Isaac shook his head. "No repayment necessary. Anyone with eyes can see you needed help." "That was your last dollar, wasn't it?" Teresa asked, having noticed the way his pocket hung empty now, the way he'd hesitated before spending it. Isaac's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his features before settling into something softer. "Sharp eyes you've got, even half-starved. Yeah, it was my last, but I've been broke before and I'll manage. You needed it more than I did." Something in his simple honesty cracked through the walls Teresa had built around her heart. This stranger had given her his last dollar without hesitation, without expecting anything in return. In a world where she'd learned that everything came with a price, his kindness felt almost unbearable. "Keep it," she heard herself say, the words tumbling out before she'd fully formed the thought. "Keep your dollar, I don't want your money." Isaac's eyebrows rose. "Miss, that don't make much sense. You clearly need help and I just spent it anyway." "Then let me earn it back for you," Teresa said, her strength returning with the food and water. "What I mean is, keep your charity. What I really want, what I truly need is something no amount of money can buy." She met his eyes, letting him see the truth in hers. "I want your heart. I want to know there's still kindness in this world, still good men who help because it's right, not because of what they'll get in return. That's worth more than any silver dollar." The words hung in the air between them, and Teresa saw the moment they struck home. Isaac's expression shifted from confusion to understanding, and then to something deeper, something that made her own heart skip, despite her exhaustion. "Well," he said slowly, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth, "I reckon that's the most interesting thing anyone's ever said to me after I bought them bread. I'm Isaac Vance, as you heard, and I'd be honored if you'd let me help you properly. No charity about it. Just one person helping another the way folks ought to." "Teresa Ainsworth," she replied, managing a tired smile of her own. "And I accept, though I still intend to earn my keep somehow." Isaac pulled up another chair and sat down across from her. "Fair enough. But first, let's figure out what brought you to Goldfield looking like you walked through hell to get here." So Teresa told him, leaving out the worst details but giving him enough to understand. She told him about the false advertisement, about the man who'd claimed to offer legitimate employment, but had other intentions entirely. She told him about her escape and the long walk through the desert, about the choice between possible death and certain degradation. Isaac listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening at certain parts of the story, his eyes darkening with anger that she instinctively knew wasn't directed at her. When she finished, he sat back and let out a long breath. "You're one of the bravest women I've ever met, Miss Ainsworth," he said quietly. "Takes real courage to walk away from guaranteed survival when the alternative is losing yourself." "I don't feel brave," Teresa admitted. "I feel scared and lost and completely uncertain about what comes next." "That's what brave is," Isaac said. "Being terrified and doing what's right anyway." He was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking. "I might have a solution to your immediate problem if you're willing to hear it. I'm listening. I work at the Silver Star Ranch about 5 miles north of town. It's owned by a widow named Martha Keene. Good woman. Tough as nails but fair. She's been looking for help with the household duties since her daughter married and moved to California. It's honest work, decent pay, and Martha provides room and board." She's particular about who she hires, but if I vouch for you, she'll at least give you a chance." Teresa felt hope flicker in her chest, fragile as a candle flame in the wind. "You do that. Vouch for a complete stranger." "I'm a pretty good judge of character," Isaac said. "And everything about you tells me you're exactly the kind of person Martha would respect. Someone who'd rather risk everything than compromise their principles. That's rare out here." "What do you do at the ranch?" Teresa asked, curious about this man who'd saved her life without a second thought. "I'm the foreman," Isaac replied. "Been working for Martha for near about 3 years now. She took a chance on me when I needed it most, and I've been trying to pay that forward ever since." He glanced toward the door, where the afternoon sun was starting to slant lower. "If you're feeling up to it, we could head out there now. I've got my horse tied up outside, and Martha's probably wondering where I've gotten to. I only came into town to pick up some supplies, but that can wait until tomorrow." Teresa finished the last of the bread and took another drink from the canteen. The food and water had worked wonders, though she still felt unsteady. But the thought of real employment, of a fresh start with people who might treat her fairly, gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. "I'd like that," she said, standing on shaky legs. Isaac immediately moved to support her, his hand gentle but firm on her elbow. "You'll ride and I'll walk," he said, brooking no argument. "It's not far and shadows steady as they come." Outside, he introduced her to a beautiful black gelding with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor. True to his word, Isaac helped Teresa into the saddle, then took the reins and began leading the horse north out of town. The late afternoon heat was still intense, but Teresa barely noticed it, too focused on the man walking beside her. "Tell me about Martha Keene," Teresa said as they left Goldfield behind. Isaac smiled, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made Teresa's breath catch. "Martha's one of those women who could probably run the whole territory if she put her mind to it. She and her husband Tom built the Silver Star from nothing, worked side by side for near about 20 years. When Tom died 4 years back, everyone expected her to sell and move back east. Instead, she hired me and a couple of other good hands and kept the place running better than ever. She's got a sharp tongue sometimes, but she's fair, and she'll stand by you if you prove yourself trustworthy." "You admire her," Teresa observed. "I do. She reminds me of my own mother in some ways. Strong women who don't let the world tell them what they can and can't do." Isaac glanced up at her, squinting against the sun. "I suspect you're cut from similar cloth, Miss Ainsworth." "Teresa, please. After you've saved my life, formality seems a bit excessive." "Teresa," Isaac said, and the way he spoke her name sent an unexpected warmth through her. "Then you should call me Isaac, or Ike if you prefer. Most folks use both." "Isaac suits you better," Teresa said, watching the play of muscles in his shoulders as he walked. "Ike sounds too casual for someone as thoughtful as you," he laughed, a rich sound that seemed to come from deep in his chest. "Thoughtful. Most people call me stubborn or occasionally pig-headed." "Those aren't mutually exclusive," Teresa pointed out, finding herself smiling despite everything. There was something about Isaac that made her feel safe, that made her believe things might actually work out. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the desert landscape rolling out around them in shades of gold and rust. Teresa had never been one for vast empty spaces, having grown up in the crowded streets of St. Louis, but there was something peaceful about the openness here, something that made her feel like she could breathe properly for the first time in months. "Can I ask you something?" Isaac said eventually. "Of course. What you said back in the store about wanting my heart instead of the money. Did you mean that literally, or were you speaking philosophically?" Teresa considered the question carefully. "Both, I suppose. I meant that your kindness, Your willingness to help someone you didn't know was more valuable to me than the dollar itself. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't something else behind it." She paused, gathering her courage. "In that moment, looking at you, seeing genuine goodness in your eyes, I felt something I haven't felt in a very long time. Hope, and maybe the beginning of something else, something I'm not quite ready to name." Isaac stopped walking and turned to look up at her, his expression serious. "I felt it too. The moment I saw you leaning against that post, something in me just knew you were important. I don't believe in fate or destiny or any of that romantic nonsense, but I believe in recognizing significant moments when they happen. And that was one of them. What do we do about it?" Teresa asked softly. "We take it slow," Isaac said. "You've been through hell, and the last thing you need is some cowboy rushing you into something you're not ready for. But I'd like permission to court you properly when you're settled and feeling more yourself, if that's something you'd welcome." Teresa felt tears prick her eyes again, but these were different from the desperate tears she'd cried earlier. These were tears of relief, of gratitude, of possibility. "I'd welcome that very much." Isaac's smile was like sunrise, bright and full of promise. "Good. That's settled then." He resumed walking, and Teresa found herself already anticipating their next conversation, the next time she'd see that smile. The Silver Star Ranch came into view as they crested a small rise, and Teresa caught her breath at the sight. It wasn't enormous by ranching standards, but it was clearly well maintained. The main house was a sturdy two-story structure with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and sides. Several outbuildings dotted the property, including a large barn, a bunkhouse, and what looked like a smokehouse. Corrals held horses and cattle, and everywhere she looked, Teresa saw evidence of care and attention. "It's beautiful," she said. "Wait until you see Martha's garden," Isaac replied. "Woman's got the greenest thumb in Nevada. Grows things that have no business surviving in this desert." As they approached the house, a woman emerged onto the porch. She was perhaps 60 years old, with iron-gray hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun and sharp blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore a practical calico dress and an apron, and she stood with the confidence of someone who'd earned her place in the world through hard work and determination. "Isaac Vance, where have you been?" Martha called out. "You were supposed to be back hours ago, and you haven't even got the supplies with you." Her gaze shifted to Teresa, and those sharp eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "And who might this young lady be?" Isaac helped Teresa down from the horse with careful hands. "Martha, this is Teresa Ainsworth. I found her in town, half dead from thirst and hunger. She's in need of work, and I thought of your opening for household help." Martha descended the porch steps and came closer, studying Teresa with an intensity that might have been intimidating if not for the kindness lurking beneath the stern exterior. "You look like you've had a rough time of it, girl. What's your story?" Teresa straightened her spine, meeting Martha's gaze directly. "I came west 6 months ago on false promises, found myself in a bad situation, and chose to walk away even though it meant risking everything. I made it to Goldfield on foot, and Isaac here saved my life by spending his last dollar on food and water for me. I'm a hard worker, Mrs. Keene, and I'm honest. I can't offer you references, but I can promise you dedication and gratitude if you'll give me a chance." Martha's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes that might have been approval. "Honest answer. I appreciate that. Can you cook?" "Yes, madam. My mother taught me before she passed. I can also sew, clean, manage household accounts, and do laundry. I worked in my aunt's boarding house for 2 years before coming west, so I'm familiar with maintaining a large household. Can you handle living on a ranch? It's not always easy out here. We work hard and we don't tolerate laziness or dishonesty." I can handle hard work, Teresa said firmly. And I've never been lazy or dishonest in my life. Those are the two things I can control, and I choose to do both well. Martha nodded slowly, then turned to Isaac. You vouch for her. With my life, Isaac said without hesitation. That's good enough for me then. Isaac's never steered me wrong. Martha looked back at Teresa. The job is yours if you want it. Room and board included, plus $30 a month. You'll have your own room in the main house, and your duties will include cooking, cleaning, laundry, and helping me with the garden and preserving. I'll expect honesty, hard work, and loyalty. In return, I'll treat you fairly and with respect. Do we have an understanding? Yes, madam, Teresa said, hardly daring to believe her luck. Thank you, Mrs. Keene. You won't regret this. I'd better not, Martha said, but there was warmth in her voice now. Come on inside and I'll show you to your room. You look like you could use a bath and a proper meal. Isaac, take care of Shadow and then come in for supper. I made stew and there's plenty. Yes, madam, Isaac said, tipping his hat to both women. His eyes met Teresa's, and the look that passed between them was full of promise. Martha led Teresa into the house, which was even lovelier inside than out. The furnishings were simple but well made, and everywhere Teresa looked, she saw signs of a home that was lived in and loved. Martha showed her to a small room on the second floor, simply furnished with a bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the garden. It's not much, Martha said, but it's clean and private. It's perfect, Teresa said honestly. After months of fear and uncertainty, this small, clean room felt like a palace. Bathrooms down the hall. I'll have one of the ranch hands bring up some hot water so you can wash up properly. There's a clean dress in the dresser that belonged to my daughter. You two look about the same size. Help yourself to it. Mrs. Keene, I can't thank you enough. Martha waved her hand dismissively. Isaac's the one you should thank. He's got good instincts about people, and if he says you're worth the chance, then you are. Now get yourself cleaned up and come down for supper when you're ready. We eat at 6, and in this house, punctuality matters. After Martha left, Teresa sank onto the bed and let herself feel the full weight of everything that had happened. This morning, she'd been walking through the desert, certain she was going to die. Now she had a job, a room, and the attention of a man who made her heart race with possibility. It was almost too much to process. The hot water arrived courtesy of a young ranch hand who barely looked at her before hurrying away. Teresa stripped off her dusty, tattered dress and washed thoroughly, scrubbing away days of grime and fear. The dress Martha had mentioned fit reasonably well, a simple blue cotton that was far nicer than anything Teresa had owned in months. She braided her damp dark hair and pinched her cheeks to give them some color, then made her way downstairs. The kitchen was warm and fragrant, dominated by a large table that could easily seat 8 people. Martha stood at the stove, stirring a pot that smelled absolutely heavenly. Isaac sat at the table, freshly washed himself, his dark hair still damp. He looked up when Teresa entered, and the smile that crossed his face made her stomach flutter. "You clean up nice," he said, then seemed to realize how that sounded. "I mean, not that you didn't look fine before, just that you look, well, healthy now, more color in your cheeks." Martha made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. "Smooth, Isaac, real smooth." "I understood what you meant," Teresa said, taking the seat Martha indicated across from Isaac. "And thank you. I feel considerably more human than I did a few hours ago." 2 other ranch hands joined them for supper, introduced as Tom Wilson and Charlie Roberts. They were both young men, respectful and clearly devoted to Martha. The conversation during the meal was easy and comfortable, ranging from ranch business to news from town to good-natured teasing. Teresa found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months, enjoying the simple pleasure of good food and friendly company. She caught Isaac watching her several times throughout the meal, his expression soft and thoughtful. Each time their eyes met, she felt that flutter again, that sense of standing on the precipice of something important. After supper, Isaac asked if she'd like to see the garden before the light faded completely. Martha gave them an approving nod, and they stepped out into the cooling evening air together. The garden was as impressive as Isaac had promised, a riot of vegetables and herbs laid out in neat rows. Teresa could see tomatoes, squash, beans, lettuce, and various other plants she couldn't immediately identify in the gathering dusk. "Martha's been working on this garden for 20 years, Isaac said as they walked between the rows. "She's got this whole irrigation system worked out, brings water from the creek that runs through the north pasture. It shouldn't work, but she's stubborn enough to make it happen anyway." "She seems like an amazing woman," Teresa said. "She is. Lost her husband to pneumonia 4 years back and it nearly broke her. But she picked herself up and kept going because that's what people like Martha do. They survive." "People like you too, I think," Teresa observed. Isaac shrugged. "I've had my share of hard times. My parents had a small farm in Kansas, worked themselves half to death trying to make it prosper. When the drought came, we lost everything. My father died when I was 17, and my mother followed 6 months later. I drifted west, took whatever work I could find, learned ranching from the ground up. Martha gave me a chance when I was 22 and angry at the world. She taught me that hard work and integrity matter more than luck or circumstances." "I'm sorry about your parents," Teresa said softly. "I appreciate that. It was hard, but it made me who I am. I figure everything in life does that, shapes us one way or another. The question is whether we let the hard times make us bitter or better." They reached the end of the garden where a bench sat facing west toward the mountains. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, the last of the day's light creating a spectacular display. Isaac gestured to the bench, and they sat together, close enough that Teresa could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I meant what I said earlier," Isaac said quietly, "about wanting to court you properly. I know the timing might seem strange, given that we just met, but something about you calls to me, Teresa. Has from the moment I first saw you." Teresa turned to look at him, studying his profile in the fading light. "I feel it too. It terrifies me a little if I'm being honest. I came west believing in promises that turned out to be lies, and I swore I wouldn't be that naive again. But when I look at you, I don't see deception. I see someone genuine, someone kind, someone I could trust." "You can trust me," Isaac said, meeting her eyes. "I won't make promises I can't keep, and I won't rush you into anything, but I will be honest with you always, even when it's hard." "Then I'll be honest too," Teresa said. "I'm attracted to you, Isaac Vance. More than I've been to any man I've ever met, but I'm also scared. The last 6 months taught me that the world can be cruel, that people aren't always what they seem. I want to believe in this in us, but I need time." "Then we'll take time," Isaac said simply. He reached over and took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. "We'll do this right, get to know each other properly. I'm not going anywhere, Teresa. The Silver Star is my home, and if Martha's hired you, then you'll be here too. We've got all the time we need." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge, their hands linked, both thinking about the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. Teresa felt something settle in her chest, a sense of rightness that she hadn't experienced in far too long. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity as Teresa settled into her new life. True to her word, she threw herself into her work with determination and skill. She rose early each morning to prepare breakfast for the household, then spent her days cleaning, doing laundry, helping Martha with the garden, and learning the rhythms of ranch life. Martha proved to be an excellent employer, firm but fair, always willing to teach Teresa new skills and answer her questions. The older woman had high standards, but she also offered genuine praise when it was earned, and Teresa found herself working harder than ever to meet those expectations. Isaac was true to his word as well, courting her with old-fashioned courtesy and patience. He brought her wildflowers from the hills, sat with her on the porch in the evenings when his work was done, and engaged her in long conversations about everything from philosophy to practical ranch management. He made her laugh with stories about his various mishaps as a younger man, and he listened with genuine interest when she talked about her own life, her dreams for the future. They didn't rush into anything physical beyond holding hands, though Teresa found herself increasingly aware of Isaac's presence. The way he moved, the sound of his voice, the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. There was a growing tension between them, not uncomfortable but charged with possibility, with anticipation of what might come when they were both ready. One evening, about a month after Teresa's arrival, Martha called them both into the parlor after supper. She settled into her favorite chair and fixed them with a knowing look. "All right, you two. I may be old, but I'm not blind. Whatever is developing between you has my blessing, but I have a few conditions." Isaac and Teresa exchanged glances, then looked back at Martha. "First," Martha continued, "you keep things respectable. I won't have scandal attached to this ranch or to Teresa's reputation. Second, you're both adults, so I expect you to handle this maturely. If it doesn't work out, you'll both stay professional and not make my life difficult. Third, Isaac, if your intentions are serious, you'd best make them clear sooner rather than later. Teresa deserves to know where she stands." "Yes, madam," Isaac said, his ears slightly red but his voice steady. "My intentions are absolutely serious. I'd court Teresa properly for as long as she needs, and when she's ready, I'd like to ask her to marry me." Teresa's heart skipped at his words, even though they weren't entirely surprising. They'd been dancing around the topic for weeks now, both of them clearly moving in that direction but neither willing to rush it. "And you, Teresa," Martha asked, "how do you feel about Isaac's intentions?" Teresa met Isaac's eyes, saw the hope and vulnerability there, and felt her own certainty crystallize. "I feel that Isaac Vance is the finest man I've ever known, and that I'd be honored to be courted by him with marriage as the eventual goal. I'm not ready to set a date yet, but I'm ready to acknowledge that this is heading somewhere serious and permanent." Martha nodded with satisfaction. "Good, that's settled then. You have my blessing and my support. Now I'm going to bed. You two can sit on the porch for a while if you want, but keep it appropriate." After Martha left, Isaac took Teresa's hand and led her outside. The night was clear and cool, a welcome relief from the day's heat. They sat on the porch swing, and Isaac put his arm around her shoulders. Teresa leaned into his warmth, feeling safe and content. "I meant what I said in there," Isaac told her. "I want to marry you, Teresa. I've known it since that first day, even though I know that sounds crazy. You're everything I didn't know I was looking for." "It doesn't sound crazy," Teresa said. "Or maybe we're both crazy together. I feel the same way. When you gave me that last $1, when you looked at me like I mattered even though I was nothing but a stranger in trouble, something in me recognized something in you, like we were meant to find each other." "I like that," Isaac said softly. He turned her face toward his with gentle fingers. "I'm going to kiss you now if that's all right with you." "That's more than all right," Teresa whispered. The kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise and restrained passion. Isaac kissed her like she was precious, like she was something to be cherished, and Teresa felt her last walls crumble. This was real. This was right. This was the life she was meant to have. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Teresa Ainsworth. I know it's fast, but it's true." "I love you too, Isaac Vance," Teresa replied, and saying the words aloud felt like coming home. They courted properly for another 3 months, getting to know each other's quirks and habits, learning to navigate disagreements, building the foundation of what would become their marriage. Isaac introduced her to the finer points of ranch management, teaching her to ride properly and understand the cattle business. Teresa shared her love of reading with him, and they spent many evenings on the porch with Isaac reading aloud while Teresa mended or worked on sewing projects. In October, as the desert air finally began to cool, Isaac took Teresa on a ride up into the hills. They packed a picnic lunch, and he led her to a spot that overlooked the entire valley, with the silver star spread out below them like a patchwork quilt. "This is where I come when I need to think," Isaac told her as they sat on a flat rock, eating sandwiches and drinking water from a shared canteen. "It's where I came after my mother died, trying to figure out what to do with my life. It's where I came when Martha first offered me the foreman position, trying to decide if I was ready for that responsibility." "It's beautiful," Teresa said, taking in the expansive view. "It's where I want to ask you to marry me," Isaac continued. He slid off the rock and onto one knee, pulling a simple gold ring from his pocket. "This was my grandmother's ring. My mother gave it to me before she died and told me to give it to a woman who was strong enough to build a life with me, not just follow along behind me. Teresa Ainsworth, you're the strongest person I know, and I can't imagine building a life with anyone else. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Teresa's face as she nodded vigorously. "Yes, yes, of course I will." Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger, where it fit perfectly, then pulled her into his arms. They kissed there on that hilltop, the wind whipping around them, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. They were married in November, in a simple ceremony at the ranch with Martha and the ranch hands as witnesses. Teresa wore a cream-colored dress that Martha had helped her sew, and Isaac wore his Sunday best, which he'd specially cleaned for the occasion. The local minister performed the ceremony in Martha's parlor, and afterward they had a celebration with food and music and dancing that lasted well into the night. Martha had moved Isaac out of the bunkhouse and into a small foreman's cottage on the property a few weeks earlier, and that's where he carried Teresa over the threshold as his wife. The cottage was modest but comfortable, with a bedroom, a small sitting area, and a kitchen. Martha had helped Teresa prepare it, adding curtains and homey touches that made it feel welcoming. That first night as husband and wife was tender and passionate, both of them nervous and excited, learning each other in this new way. Isaac was gentle and patient, making sure Teresa felt cherished and safe. They made love slowly, taking their time, and afterward lay tangled together in the darkness, talking and laughing and making plans for their future. "I want to give you everything," Isaac whispered against her hair. "A good life, a real home, children if you want them, everything you deserve." "I already have everything I need," Teresa replied. "I have you." The first year of their marriage was both wonderful and challenging as they learned to navigate life as a partnership. They had their first real fight when Isaac made a major decision about the ranch without consulting her, and Teresa had to make it clear that she expected to be treated as an equal partner in all things. Isaac, to his credit, listened and apologized, and they established better communication patterns going forward. Teresa continued working alongside Martha in the household, but she also became more involved in the business side of the ranch, revealing a head for numbers and strategy that impressed both Isaac and Martha. She implemented a new bookkeeping system that helped them track expenses and profits more efficiently, and she suggested several improvements to their cattle management that proved successful. Martha, who had been watching their marriage with approval, began gradually turning over more responsibility to them. She was getting older and ready to step back from the day-to-day operations, though she remained a vital presence on the ranch. In the spring of 1880, Teresa discovered she was pregnant. She told Isaac one evening after supper when they were walking through Martha's garden together, and he swept her up in his arms and spun her around, laughing with joy. "We're having a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We're going to be parents." Their son was born in December of that year, during the first snowfall Nevada had seen in 5 years. They named him Thomas Isaac Vance, after Isaac's father and in honor of Martha's late husband. He was a healthy baby with his mother's dark hair and his father's green-brown eyes. And from the moment Isaac held him, Teresa knew her husband was completely smitten. Isaac proved to be a devoted father, involved in every aspect of Thomas's care in a way that was unusual for the time. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with a crying baby in the middle of the night, and talked to his son constantly, telling him stories and sharing his thoughts as if Thomas could understand every word. "I want him to know his father," Isaac told Teresa one night as he rocked their sleeping son. "I want him to grow up secure in the knowledge that he's loved and valued. No child of mine will ever doubt that." Teresa fell even more in love with her husband watching him with their son. The tender care he showed, the patience and devotion, only confirmed what she'd known since that first day in Goldfield. Isaac Vance was one of the good ones, a man of integrity and heart. When Thomas was 6 months old, Martha called Isaac and Teresa into her office. She looked serious, and Teresa felt a flutter of concern until Martha smiled. "Relax, both of you. I'm not dying or anything dramatic, but I am getting older and it's time I made my intentions clear." She pulled out a sheaf of papers. "I've been to the lawyer in town, and I've had my will updated. The Silver Star is going to you too when I pass. You've earned it through hard work and loyalty, and I know you'll take care of this place the way Tom and I always intended." "Martha, we can't accept that," Isaac started, but Martha cut him off. "Yes, you can and you will. This ranch needs young blood, people who'll run it for the next 40 years the way Tom and I ran it for 20. You two are those people. Besides, my daughter is perfectly happy in California with her merchant husband. She has no interest in ranch life, and I've already discussed this with her. She agrees with my decision." Teresa reached across the desk and took Martha's hand. "Thank you for everything, for taking a chance on me that first day, for teaching me so much, for supporting us. You've been more than an employer, you've been a mother to me." Martha's eyes grew suspiciously bright. "Well, someone had to keep you two from making complete fools of yourselves, and you've given me a grandson to spoil, which is more than I could have hoped for." They settled into their new roles as heirs to the Silver Star, working even harder to prove themselves worthy of Martha's trust. The ranch prospered under their combined management, with Teresa's business acumen complementing Isaac's practical ranching skills. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, whom they named Martha and Vance after the woman who had given them both so much. Young Martha had her mother's quick mind and her father's easy smile, and she wrapped her grandfather figure status around old Martha's heart from day one. The older Martha lived to see both grandchildren grow into toddlers, passing peacefully in her sleep in the summer of 1884. Her death hit them all hard, but they honored her memory by continuing to run the Silver Star with the integrity and care she'd instilled in them. As the years passed, Isaac and Teresa built a life that exceeded even their wildest dreams. They expanded the ranch gradually and carefully, never overextending but always improving. They raised their children with love and discipline, teaching them the value of hard work and the importance of treating people fairly. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books almost as much as he loved horses. Martha Ann was more adventurous, always exploring and asking questions, keeping her parents on their toes. When Thomas was 10 and Martha was 8, they welcomed another son, Daniel James Vance, who seemed to inherit the best qualities of both his parents and his siblings. The children grew up hearing the story of how their parents met, about the cowboy who offered a desperate woman his last dollar, and the woman who said she wanted his heart instead. It became a family legend, a touchstone that reminded them all of the power of kindness and the importance of seeing value in people beyond their circumstances. Teresa often reflected on how different her life might have been if she'd never walked into Goldfield that day, if Isaac hadn't been there, if he'd walked past her instead of stopping to help. But he had stopped, and that simple act of compassion had changed both their lives forever. Isaac felt the same way. "I've wondered sometimes what I'd be doing if I hadn't gone into town that day," he told Teresa one evening as they sat on their porch, watching their grandchildren play in Martha's garden. They were in their 60s now, their hair gray, their faces lined with the passage of time, but their love had only deepened with the years. "You'd probably be running this ranch just fine," Teresa said, leaning against his shoulder, "but you'd be doing it alone." "Exactly," Isaac said. "And that's no way to live. You gave my life meaning beyond just work and survival. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to be better than I might have been otherwise." "You did the same for me," Teresa replied. "You saved my life that day, Isaac, in more ways than one. You showed me that good men still existed, that kindness wasn't extinct. You gave me a reason to hope again." They watched as their oldest granddaughter, Thomas's daughter Sarah, helped her younger cousin pick vegetables in the garden. The scene was so peaceful, so full of love and continuity that it made Teresa's heart ache with gratitude. "We did good, didn't we?" Isaac said softly. "We did very good," Teresa agreed. Their legacy extended beyond just their children and grandchildren. The Silver Star became known throughout Nevada as a fair employer, a place where people were treated with respect, regardless of their circumstances. Isaac and Teresa had a reputation for giving second chances to people who needed them, just as Martha had done for Isaac, just as Isaac had done for Teresa. They sponsored several young people over the years, offering them work and training when they had nowhere else to turn. Some stayed on at the ranch, becoming valued employees. Others moved on to build their own lives elsewhere, but they always carried with them the lessons they'd learned at the Silver Star. As Isaac and Teresa grew older, they gradually turned over more of the ranch operations to Thomas, who had grown into a capable and thoughtful manager much like his father. Martha Ann had married a neighboring rancher, and Daniel had decided to become a teacher, opening a school in Goldfield that served the children of miners and ranchers alike. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children organized a celebration at the ranch. Friends and family came from all over Nevada, and the house was filled with laughter and music and love. Isaac stood up to make a speech, and the room fell quiet. 40 years ago," he began, "I was a cowboy with a single silver dollar to my name. I spent that dollar on bread and water for a desperate woman I'd never met before, and it turned out to be the best investment I ever made." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Teresa looked at me that day and said something I've never forgotten. She told me to keep my charity, that what she really wanted was my heart. Well, Teresa, you got it. You've had it from that first moment, and you'll have it until I draw my last breath. You took a broken man who didn't even know he was broken and made him whole. You gave me a family, a purpose, a life worth living. I love you more today than I did 40 years ago, and that's saying something, because I loved you pretty fiercely even then. Teresa stood and joined him, tears streaming down her face. Isaac Vance, you are the finest man I've ever known. You saved my life in that dusty town, not just by giving me food and water, but by showing me that goodness still existed in the world. Every day since then has been a gift. You've been my partner, my lover, my best friend, my anchor in every storm. I would walk through that desert 1,000 times if it meant finding you at the end of it. They kissed to thunderous applause, and the celebration continued late into the night. But eventually the guests departed, their children went home to their own families, and Isaac and Teresa were alone in their cottage, the same cottage where they'd spent their wedding night 40 years earlier. No regrets? Isaac asked as they prepared for bed. Not a single one, Teresa said. Just that I didn't find you sooner, Isaac replied, pulling her close. But then again, maybe we had to go through what we did to appreciate what we found. Maybe all those hard times were just preparing us for this. Maybe, Teresa agreed. Or maybe we just got lucky. Either way, I'm grateful. They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had for 40 years, each still finding comfort and peace in the other's presence. Isaac passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1921, at the age of 84. He'd lived a long, full life, surrounded by love until the very end. Teresa held his hand as he slipped away, whispering reminders of their life together, making sure he knew how loved he was. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives Isaac had touched over the years. Former ranch hands spoke of his fairness and wisdom. Neighbors talked about his generosity and integrity. His children and grandchildren shared stories of his humor and kindness, his unconditional love and unwavering support. Teresa stood at his graveside, supported by Thomas on one side and Martha Ann on the other, and said her final goodbye to the man who had been her everything for over 40 years. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me that day, for stopping when you could have walked past, for giving me your heart when I asked for it. Thank you for every moment, every kiss, every laugh, every challenge we faced together. I love you, Isaac Vance. I always will." Teresa lived for 5 more years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, watching the family she and Isaac had built continue to grow and flourish. She spent her final years telling stories, making sure the younger generations knew where they came from, what values they should hold dear. She never remarried, never even considered it. Isaac had been her one great love, and she was content to live on the memories they'd made together. On a warm summer evening in 1926, Teresa passed away peacefully in her sleep, in the same bed where she'd slept beside Isaac for so many years. Her last words to Martha Ann, who sat vigil beside her, were simple but profound. "Tell them," Teresa whispered. "Tell them all that love is the only thing that matters. Everything else fades, but love endures. Your father offered me his last dollar, and I told him to keep it, that I wanted his heart instead. I got it, and it made all the difference. Love makes all the difference." She was laid to rest beside Isaac, under the shade of an old cottonwood tree on the ranch they'd built together. Their headstone was simple, inscribed with their names, their dates, and a single line that captured the essence of their love story. She wanted his heart, and he gave it gladly. The Silver Star continued to thrive under the management of their descendants, each generation adding their own chapter to the story, while maintaining the core values Isaac and Teresa had established. The ranch became a testament to the power of kindness, the importance of second chances, and the enduring strength of true love. Years later, one of Teresa's great-granddaughters was researching family history and came across a letter Teresa had written shortly before her death. In it, she'd reflected on her life and the moment that changed everything. "People often ask me if I believe in fate," Teresa had written. "I tell them I believe in choices. Isaac chose to stop and help me that day in Goldfield. He chose to spend his last dollar on a stranger. I chose to be honest about what I really needed, which wasn't money or charity, but proof that kindness still existed in the world. We both chose to take a chance on each other, to build something beautiful from what started as an act of simple human compassion. That's not fate. That's two people deciding to be brave, deciding to be open to possibility, deciding to invest in each other. The best decisions of my life all stemmed from that first moment when I looked at a kind cowboy and told him I wanted his heart. He gave it to me, completely and without reservation, and I spent the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that gift. I hope I succeeded." The great-granddaughter shared the letter at a family gathering, and there wasn't a dry eye in the room. The story of Isaac and Teresa had been told and retold over the years, but reading Teresa's own words about it brought the reality of their love into sharp focus. Their story became a family treasure, passed down through the generations as an example of what real love looked like. It wasn't about grand gestures or fairy tale romance. It was about seeing value in another person when they were at their lowest. It was about offering help without expecting anything in return. It was about being brave enough to ask for what you really needed and brave enough to give it. The silver dollar that Isaac had pulled from his pocket that day, the one he'd offered to Teresa before she told him she wanted something more valuable, had become a family heirloom. Isaac had kept it, retrieving it from the shopkeeper the next day with other funds he'd earned. He'd given it to Teresa on their first anniversary, along with a note that read simply, "You were right. Your heart was worth more than all the silver in Nevada." Teresa had carried that dollar with her for the rest of her life, a tangible reminder of the day her life changed. When she died, it was found in her jewelry box, wrapped in the note Isaac had written. The family decided to display it at the ranch, in a place of honor where every generation could see it and remember the story behind it. The legacy of Isaac and Teresa Vance extended far beyond their immediate family. The values they'd lived by, the kindness they'd shown to strangers, the integrity they'd brought to every aspect of their lives, these things rippled outward in ways they could never have anticipated. Former employees who'd been given second chances at the Silver Star went on to run their own successful businesses, treating their own employees with the same fairness they'd experienced. Children who'd attended Daniel's school grew up to become teachers themselves, passing on the love of learning he'd instilled in them. The neighboring ranches adopted some of the innovative practices Teresa had implemented, improving the entire region's prosperity. But perhaps the most profound impact was on how people thought about love and marriage. In a time and place where marriages were often practical arrangements, where love was considered secondary to financial security and social standing, Isaac and Teresa had proven that a partnership based on mutual respect, genuine affection, and shared values could create something extraordinary. Their story reminded people that the best relationships weren't found, they were built. They required work and commitment, honesty and vulnerability, patience and forgiveness. But when built on a foundation of authentic caring, they could weather any storm and last a lifetime. The cottage where Isaac and Teresa had lived remained standing for generations, carefully maintained by their descendants. It became a tradition for newly engaged couples in the family to spend a night there, absorbing the atmosphere of love that seemed to permeate the very walls. Many reported feeling the presence of their ancestors, a sense of blessing and approval that strengthened their own commitments. On the 100th anniversary of Isaac and Teresa's wedding, the family organized a massive celebration at the Silver Star. Descendants came from all over the country, some who still worked the ranch, others who'd pursued different paths but still felt connected to their roots. During the celebration, Teresa's great-great-grandson, also named Isaac, stood up to speak. He was a young man of 25, newly married himself, and he looked remarkably like his famous ancestor. 100 years ago, he said, a cowboy met a desperate woman and changed both their lives forever. That cowboy was my great-great-grandfather, and that woman was my great-great-grandmother. Their story has been told so many times in our family that it sometimes feels more like legend than history. But I've been reading their letters, looking through old photographs, talking to the oldest members of our family who remember the stories their own grandparents told them. And what I've learned is that Isaac and Teresa were real people who made real choices that created real consequences, good ones, that echo through all of us gathered here today. He held up a photograph, carefully preserved, showing Isaac and Teresa in their later years, sitting on the porch of their cottage. They were looking at each other rather than the camera, and the love in their expressions was unmistakable. This is what we come from, young Isaac continued. This is our legacy. Not just the land or the ranch or the financial success, though those things matter. Our real inheritance is the example they set, the reminder that how we treat people matters, that kindness has power, that love, real love, requires courage and commitment. Great-great-grandfather Isaac could have walked past great-great-grandmother Teresa that day in Goldfield. He could have decided she wasn't his problem. But he stopped. He helped. And when she told him what she really needed was his heart, he was brave enough to give it. That's who we come from. That's who we should aspire to be. The speech resonated deeply with everyone present, a reminder of why they'd all come together, why this story still mattered a century later. As the celebration continued, people shared their own stories of love and connection, creating new memories that would someday be part of the family history. Children played in the same garden Martha had tended so carefully, running between the same rows where vegetables still grew. Young couples walked the same paths Isaac and Teresa had walked, making promises to each other under the same vast Nevada sky. The Silver Star itself had changed over the years, growing and evolving with the times, but the heart of it remained the same. It was still a place where hard work was valued, where people were treated fairly, where second chances were given to those who needed them. The core values Isaac and Teresa had established remained the guiding principles, passed down through each generation. As the sun set on that anniversary celebration, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, it was easy to imagine Isaac and Teresa looking down on it all, satisfied with the legacy they'd created, proud of the family they'd built, content in the knowledge that their love story had become something larger than themselves. Their story proved that sometimes the most important moments in life come when we least expect them, that desperation and hope can lead to beautiful beginnings, that a single act of kindness can change the trajectory of multiple lives. It showed that real love isn't about perfection or fairy tales, but about two imperfect people choosing each other, day after day, year after year, building something worthwhile together. Isaac Vance had offered Teresa Ainsworth his last dollar on a dusty street in Goldfield, Nevada, in 1878. She'd told him to keep it, that she wanted his heart instead. He'd given it to her, completely and without reservation, and she'd treasured it for the rest of her life. Together, they'd built not just a successful ranch, but a life full of love, meaning, and purpose. They'd raised children who embodied their values, created opportunities for people who needed them, and left behind a legacy that would endure for generations. Their love story reminded everyone who heard it that the best things in life often come from the simplest gestures, that true wealth has nothing to do with money, and that a generous heart is the most valuable thing anyone can offer another person. Isaac and Teresa had understood that fundamental truth, and they'd lived it every day of their long lives together. As the stars emerged over the Silver Star Ranch that anniversary night, the same stars that had witnessed Isaac and Teresa's first kiss, their wedding, the birth of their children, and countless quiet moments of connection over 40 years of marriage, it seemed fitting that their story continued to inspire, to challenge, to remind people what really matters in life. Love, connection, kindness, courage. These were the gifts Isaac and Teresa had given each other and the world, and they were gifts that would never lose their value, no matter how much time passed. Their story began with a desperate woman and a compassionate cowboy on a hot summer day in Goldfield, Nevada. It grew into a love that spanned decades, created a family that spread across the country, and left a legacy that would endure for generations. It was a reminder that every person we meet, every choice we make, every act of kindness we extend, has the potential to change the world in ways we cannot imagine. Isaac offered Teresa his last dollar. She wanted his heart instead. He gave it gladly, and in return she gave him hers. Together, they proved that love, real love, the kind that lasts and transforms and creates something beautiful, begins with seeing the value in another person and choosing to invest in them completely. That was their gift to each other, and through their descendants and the countless lives they touched, it became their gift to the world. The Silver Star Ranch stood as a monument to that truth, still thriving a century later, still guided by the principles Isaac and Teresa had established, still proof that kindness, integrity, and love were the most valuable currencies anyone could possess. Their story lived on, told and retold, adapted and cherished, a family treasure more valuable than all the silver in Nevada, just as Teresa had known it would be from the very beginning.